So, just a moment of kind of seriousness before we get into this. I do realize that whatever is going on over in the Middle East is a very divisive topic. Without trying to get too political, obviously, I think most of us recognize that the idea of something can be good, but the application of that idea is rarely so perfect, and is always something that is perhaps, at the very least, worthy of critique. There are people who spend their entire lives studying this, and they still can't agree on who's in the right, who's in the wrong, what all is going on. Point being, it's a very, very, very complex issue. Anyways, right, as I said, I will try to avoid anything very controversial for the next while here, but for the moment, we're going to check out something I've always been kind of curious about, aka history of Israel. We start at the Second Temple period. I believe this was preceded by, I guess, the Babylonian diaspora. This gets into Bible times almost, but we have 538 to 332 BC. I'm not using BCE, you troglodytes. No, I'm going to go grab some water, though. Alright, welcome back to Popular History. The history of Israel. Not in the least bit divisive. Alright, Achaemenid. I don't know. Period, 538 to 332 BC. You say it right, like a Christian. No. In 538 BC, Cyrus the Great conquered Babylon and took over its empire. Okay, is this supposed to be the Persians? That looks like the Persian Empire. Is there some sort of fancy ancient Iranian empire? That's Persian. That's the Persian Empire. Granting religious freedom to all people subjugated by Babylonians. See Cyrus Cyllin? What? Okay. Is that some sort of writing? Okay. According to the Bible, Jewish exiles in Babylon, including 50,000 Judeans led by Zerubbabel, returned to Judah to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. The second temple was subsequently completed 515 BC. A second group of 5,000, led by Ezra and Nehemiah, returned to Judah in 457 BC. 456. Oh, dang it. The first was empowered by the Persian king to enforce religious rule. The second had the status of governor and a royal mission to restore the walls of the city. Yeah. There was the whole thing, if you remember the story in the Bible, where they were supposed to have been like working with one hand with a weapon in the other. Yeah, they would apparently, like, I think that was the idea, like they'd be working with one hand and they had a weapon in the other. There were some people who didn't really want the walls to be finished. I forgot what the actual names of them were, but yeah. To be fair, there's actually, that's something that's stereotypically Jewish in that there were problems involving, I think it was some sort of lending and buying, where people who were really wealthy had, I think people would almost indenture their children in order to pay for debts or something. This was, I think, between Jews or something, where they would indenture their children in order to pay for a debt, and Nehemiah was, either Ezra or Nehemiah was taking them to task for this notion, and basically, I think the idea was he wanted these people to be able to help with the walls, or I don't know. You have to go read it again. Yeah, like I said, kind of it's like a very stereotypical Jewish story. I think there would be stereotypes about their thriftiness with regards to money, in any case, and lending and buying. A lot of. Anyways, the country remained a province of the Achaemenid Empire called Yehud. Down with the Yehud. That's a thing, right? The final text of the Torah is thought to have been written during the Persian period, probably 450 to 350 BC. The text was formed by editing and unifying earlier texts. The returning Israelites adopted an Aramaic script, also known as the Ashura alphabet, which they brought back from Babylon. This is the current Hebrew script. Interesting. For whatever reason, I would have thought of the Hebrews as having their own script at some point, but the Hebrew calendar closely resembles the Babylonian calendar and probably dates from this period. The Bible describes tensions between the returnees, the elite of the First Temple period, and those who had remained in Judah. It is possible that the returnees, supported by the Persian monarchy, became large landholders at the expense of the people who had remained to work the land in Judah, whose opposition to the Second Temple would have reflected the fear that exclusion from the cult, how dare you, sir, would deprive them of land rights. Judah had become, in practice, a theocracy ruled by the hereditary high priests and a Persian-appointed governor, frequently Jewish. The Persian-appointed governor, frequently Jewish, charged with keeping order and seeing that tribute was paid. A Judean military garrison was placed by the Persians on Elephantine Island. Okay. It's an island on the Nile, forming a part of the city of Aswan in Upper Egypt. The archaeological digs on the island became a World Heritage Site in 1979, along with other examples of Upper Egyptian architecture as part of the Nubian monuments from Abu Simbel to Philaea. All right, that last one sounds Greek. Philaea. Near Aswan in Egypt. In the early 20th century, 175 papyrus documents recording activity in this community were discovered, including the Passover Papyrus, a letter instructing the garrison on how to correctly conduct the Passover feast. Interesting. This is the Persian garrison who was conducting the Passover feast. Alright. In 332 BC, Alexander the Great of Macedon conquered the region as part of his campaign against the that empire. After his death in 322, his generals divided the empire, and Judea became the frontier region between the Seleucid Empire and the Ptolemaic kingdom in Egypt. Ptolemy. Who was Ptolemy? Was he one of the pharaohs or something? It's kind of a cool name. I copy that for later. In Egypt, following a century of Ptolemaic rule. Actually, I'm going to look that up now. All right. All right. Search web for Ptolemaic. Relating to Greek. So it's a Greek thing. Relating to the Greek astronomer Ptolemy and his theories. Okay. Cool. Following a century of Ptolemaic rule, Judea was conquered by the Seleucid Empire in 200 BC. The Battle of Panium. Hellenistic rulers generally respected Jewish culture and protected Jewish institutions. Judea was ruled by a hereditary office, the high priest of Israel, as a Hellenistic vassal. Nevertheless, the region underwent the process of Hellenization, which heightened tensions between Greeks, Hellenized Jews, and observant Jews. These tensions escalated into clashes involving a power struggle for the position of high priest and the character of the holy city of Jerusalem. When Antioch IV, Epiphanes, consecrated the temple, forbade Jewish practices, and forcibly imposed Hellenistic norms on the Jews, several centuries of religious tolerance under Jewish control came to an end. In 167 BC, the Maccabean revolt erupted after Matthias, a Jewish priest of the Hasmonean lineage, Hasmonean, yeah, killed the Hellenized Jew, and a Seleucid official who participated in sacrifice to the Greek gods in Modin. What's Modin? Was an ancient Jewish city located in Judea near the modern city of Modin, Israel. His son Judas Maccabeus defeated the Seleucids in several battles, and in 164 BC he captured Jerusalem and restored temple worship, an event commemorated by the Jewish festival of Hanukkah. That's legit. Nice. It's like their 4th of July almost. To be fair, though, it happens around Christmas, so it's kind of... I think it's more that type of ethos than a type of revolutionary type of idea. I guess it could be wrong. I guess I don't know. I've never actually looked into Hanukkah that much. Maybe it is literally just that type of like 4th of July-esque rebellion, conquer, etc. 12 days of Hanukkah. There's still the presents, right? One for each day. So I'm not for sure exactly how that works. Anyways, after Judas's how do you say it? Judas's death, his brothers Jonathan Aphas, and Simon Thassi. These names are getting me. All right, were able to establish and consolidate a vassal Hasmonean state in Judea, capitalizing on the Seleucid Empire's decline and result of internal instability and wars with the Parthians. Who are the Parthians? Parthians, also known as the Arsacid Empire, was a major Iranian political and cultural power centered in ancient Iran from 247 BC to 224 AD. Yeah, see, these people do it right. BC AD, in the year of our Lord. They're not sinners. To be fair, I think if I were not a Christian, I guess the whole idea of it feels like it is just kind of the state of the world that like so much of it is oriented around Christian culture, at least in the West. That like, yeah, AD BC kind of makes sense. But I suppose there are people who would prefer not to acknowledge a God either they don't believe in or a God that they don't acknowledge, I suppose, in the case of atheists or people who just practice other religions. So maybe they wanted to come up with... I think that's the whole reason they created the BCE, before Common Era. And then... No, BC would... Hold on. What is the Common Era? I think they just use CE. Like BCE and then CE. Before Common Era, Common Era. Like the degenerates they are. Anyways. And by forging with the rising Roman Republic, Hasmonean leader John Hyrcanus was able to gain independence, doubling Judea's territory. He took control of Idumea, where he converted the Edomites to Judaism. He invaded Scythopolis and Samaria, where he demolished the Samaritan temple. See, the Samaritans were kind of in a bit of a strange position where I would have gotten the ideas at one point they would have been Jewish, but they had either intermarried or there was some sort of thing going on where they weren't Jewish anymore. Samaritans. Samaritan version of their own history became available. The chronicles of a variety of non-Samaritan. Alright. Let's look this up. Samaritans, Romanized, often preferring to be called Israelite Samaritans, are an ethno religious group originating from the Hebrews and Israelites of the ancient Near East. They are indigenous to Samaria, a historical region in ancient Israel and Judah. They are adherents to Samaritanism, an Abrahamic monotheistic and ethnic religion that developed alongside Judaism. Interesting. Regarding the Samaritan Pentateuch as the unaltered Torah, the Samaritans view Judaism as a closely related faith, but claim that Judaism is fundamentally alters the original Israelite religion. Interesting. The plot thickens. The most notable theological divide between Jewish and Samaritan doctrine concerns the holy site, which the Jews believe is the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, where I'm pretty sure that there isn't there some sort of mosque built there now? I could be wrong. In Jerusalem, and which Samaritans identify as Mount Gerizim, near modern Nablus, and ancient Shechem. It's fun to say. Shechem. It sounds vaguely like some vulgar invocation, though. A cuss or a curse, sorry. In the Samaritan version of Deuteronomy 16:6, both Jews and Samaritans assert that the binding of Isaac occurred at their respective holy sites. The binding of Isaac, sorry. I wouldn't have gotten... Well, I guess... I don't really know that I would have thought either of those necessarily occurred. I don't know if, I would have thought that Jerusalem had anything to do with the binding of Isaiah. But then again, I'm not really Jewish. Just kind of the bastard offspring of Judaism, I suppose. No, I'll reassert that. Or I'll reiterate that. Judaism is the senile, older relative of Christianity. The lovable yet senile older relative of Christianity. That's how that works. Alright, Samaritans attributed their schism with the Jews to Eli, who was the penultimate Israel Shaphat, and a priest in Shiloh in 1 Samuel 1. The Samaritan belief is that he is accused of establishing a worship site in Shiloh with himself as high priest in opposition to the one at Mount Gerizim. Interesting. Anyways, I think we're done there for now. Samaritan. All right. We're gonna maybe look at the neo-Nazi stuff. I'll see if I have time for that. Give the loonies a little bit of a air to voice their opinions. All right. Hyrcanus was the first Hasmonean leader in the to mint coins under his sons, King Aristobulus, Alexander Hannaeus. Oh, for the love. Too many names. Hasmonean Judea became a kingdom, and its territories continued to expand, now also covering the coastal plains, Galilee, and part of Transjordan. All right. Some scholars argue that the Hasmonean dynasty also institutionalized the final Jewish biblical canon. Under Hasmonean rule, Pharisees, Sadducees, and the mystic Essenes? What is this? Were a mystic Jewish community during the Second Temple period that flourished from the 2nd century BC to 1st century AD. All right. As the principal Jewish social movements, the Pharisee sage Simon ben Shetach is credited with establishing the first schools based around meeting houses. Blah 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 blah. So we're going to go to the early Roman period here. All right. In 63 BC, the Roman Republic conquered Judea, ending Jewish independence under the Hasmoneans. Roman general Pompey intervened in a dynastic civil war, and after capturing Jerusalem, reinstated Hyrcanus II as high priest, but denied him the title of king. Rome soon installed the Herodian dynasty of Idumean descent, but Jewish by conversion. soon installed the Herodian dynasty of Idumean descent. Who's Idumean? Alright, Edom. Okay, interesting. So it's the southern part there. But Jewish by conversion as a loyal replacement for the nationalist Hasmoneans. In 37 BC, Herod the Great, the first client king of his line, took power after defeating the restored Hasmonean king Antigonus II, Matthias. Herod imposed heavy taxes, suppressed opposition, and centralized authority, which fostered widespread resentment. Herod also carried out major monumental construction projects throughout his kingdom and significantly expanded the Second Temple, which he transformed into one of the largest religious structures in the ancient world. After his death in 4 BC, his kingdom was divided amongst his sons into a tetrarchy, which I looked up actually. It just means divided into 4 sectors, I guess. I think that's the idea. Like, you basically just it's a ruler, like a tetrarch is a ruler of one of 4 segments of whatever country or province or whatever. I don't know. Continued under Roman oversight. In 6 CE, Roman Emperor August transformed Judea into a Roman province, deposing its last Jewish ruler, Herod Archelaus, and appointing the Roman governor in his place. That same year, a census triggered a small uprising by Judas of Galilee, the founder of a movement that rejected foreign authority and recognized only God as king. Over the next 6 decades, with a brief exception of a short period of Jewish autonomy under the client king Herod Agrippa, the province remained under direct Roman administration. Some governors ruled with brutality and showed little regard for Jewish religion sensitivities, deepening resentment among the local population. This discontentment was also fueled by poor governance, corruption, and growing economic inequality, along with a rising tension between the Jews and neighboring populations over ethnic, religious, and territorial disputes. At the same time, collective memory of the Maccabean revolt and the period of Hasmonean independence continued to inspire hopes for national liberations from Roman control. In 64 CE, in other words, in the year of our Lord, AD 64, the temple high priest Joshua ben Gamla introduced a religious requirement for Jewish boys to learn to read from the age of 6. Over the next few hundred years, this requirement became steadily more ingrained in Jewish tradition. That's kind of interesting because I feel like they would be almost quite, I guess, I don't know, it seems like that's kind of a unique sort of thing to do, like mandatory reading. Advantageous to some extent as well. The Jewish-Roman Wars were a series of large-scale revolts by Jewish subjects against Roman Empire between 66 and 335 AD. The term primarily applies to the First Jewish-Roman War, 66 to 73 AD, and revolt, 132 to 136 AD. Both nationalist rebellions aimed at restoring Jewish independence in Judea. Some sources also include the Diaspora Revolt, 115 to 117 AD, an ethno-religious conflict fought across the eastern Mediterranean, including the Kaitos Wars in Judea. The Jewish-Roman Wars had a devastating impact on the Jewish people, transforming them from a major population in eastern Mediterranean into a dispersed and persecuted minority. The First Jewish-Roman War culminated in the destruction of Jerusalem and other towns and villages in Judea, resulting in a significant loss of life and considerable segmentation of the population being uprooted or displaced. Those who remained were stripped of any form of political autonomy. Subsequently, that's a good one. Subsequently, the brutal suppression of Bar Kokhba I'm assuming that's just Bar Kokhba revolt, resulted in even more severe consequences. Judah witnessed a significant depopulation as many Jews were killed, expelled, or sold into slavery. The outcome of the conflict marked the termination of efforts to reestablish a Jewish state until the modern era. Jews were banned from residing in the vicinity of Jerusalem, which the Romans rebuilt into a pagan colony of Alea Capitolina. The province of Judah was renamed Syria Palestina. So I would have gotten the idea that Palestina was kind of a xenonym. Palestine. Syria Palestina was renamed Roman province, formerly known as Judea, following the Roman suppression of the Bar Kokhba revolt in what became known as Palestina. Between the early, I think it was kind of, they wanted to tick off the Jews by calling it, which I think Palestina was in reference to the ancient, maybe enemies of Judea, which is like the Philistines. I kind of think that's what it had to do with. The Philistines were actually, they would have also maybe been kind of foreigners as well, where I think they would have, the idea was they might have been like Greek sailors or something like that, who would kind of settle on the coastline there in the Gaza Strip or somewhere around there-ish. So, yeah, Syria, Palestine. I was wondering when that happened. Syria, Palestina, collectively, these events enhanced the role of Jewish diaspora, relocating the Jewish demographics and cultural center to Galilee, and eventually to Babylonia, with smaller communities across the Mediterranean, the Middle East, and beyond. The Jewish-Roman Wars also had a major impact on Judaism. After the central worship site, the Second Temple, the Second Temple Judaism, and the Second Temple in Jerusalem was destroyed by Titus's troops in 70 A.D. The destruction of the temple led to the transformation in Jewish religious practices, emphasizing prayer, Torah study, and communal gatherings in synagogues. This pivotal shift laid the foundation for the emergence of Rabbinic Judaism. Rabbinic Judaism is rooted in the many forms of Judaism that coexist and together form the Second Temple Judaism in the land of Israel, giving birth to classical. What are we doing here? In the land of Israel, giving birth to classical Rabbinic Judaism, which flourished. Which seemed to be the dominant form of Judaism since the late antiquity after the codification of the Babylonian Talmud. The central text of Rabbinic Judaism and second in authority only to the Hebrew Bible, the first 5 books of which form the Torah. Its primary source of Jewish law and Jewish theology. It consists of part of the oral Torah compiled and its commentaries. Alright, interesting. Late Roman period. As a result of the disastrous effects of Bar Kokhba revolt, Jewish presence in the region significantly dwindled. Over the next centuries, more Jews left to communities in the diaspora, especially the large, speedily growing Jewish community in Babylonia and Arabia. Others remained in the land of Israel, where the spiritual and demographic center shifted from the depopulated Judea to Galilee. Jewish presence also continued in the southern Hebron Hills, in En Gedi, and on the coastal plains. The Mishnah and the Jewish Talmud, a huge compilation of rabbinic discussions, were compiled during the 2nd to 4th centuries, Anno Domini, in Tiberias, and Jerusalem. Following the revolt, Judais's countryside was penetrated by it's kind of violent, penetrated by pagan populations, including migrants from nearby provinces of Syria, Phoenicia, and Arabia. Whereas Elea Capitolina, its immediate vicinity, okay, what is this? Minor city within the Roman Empire. It was a Roman colony founded during the Roman Emperor Hadrian's visit to Judea, 130 Anno Domini. It was founded on the ruins of Jerusalem. Okay. Founded on the ruins of Jerusalem, which had been almost totally razed after the siege in 70 AD. Its immediate vicinity and administrative centers were now inhabited by Roman veterans and settlers from the western parts of the empire. The Romans permitted hereditary rabbinic patriarch from the house of Hillel, called Nasi, to represent the Jews in dealings with Romans. One prominent figure was Judah ha-Nasi, credited with compiling the final version of the Mishnah. What is this? The first written collection of Jewish oral traditions are known as the Oral Torah, having been collected in 3rd century CE. Oh, dang it. A Christian man. AD, its first work of rabbinic literature, primarily in Mishnah Hebrew, but also partly in Jewish Aramaic. The oldest surviving physical blah blah blah. All right. A vast collection of Jewish oral traditions. He also emphasized the importance of education in Judaism, leading to requirements that illiterate Jews be treated as outcasts. Okay. That's a little bit extreme. I support literacy, but yeah. This might have contributed to some illiterate Jews converting to Christianity. The Jewish seminaries, such as those at Shefaram and Bet Shearim, continued to produce scholars. The best of these became members of the Sanhedrin, which was located first at Sepphoris and later at Tiberias in the Galilee. Many synagogues. All right. Oh, where was I? Many synagogues have been found dating to this period, and burial site of the Sanhedrin leaders was discovered in Bet Shariam. In the 3rd century, the Roman Empire faced an economic crisis and imposed heavy taxations to fund wars of imperial succession. How delightful. This situation prompted additional Jewish migration from Syria, Palestina, to the Sasanian Empire. Okay, what's this? Officially, Aranshar was an Iranian empire that was founded and ruled by the... Oh, come on, where was I? Right, that's not insubstantial. The length of this ancient Iran was second only to that of Arasid dynasty of Persia or something. Anyways, where was I? Dang it. Migration from Syria, Palestine, to the Sasanian Empire, known for its more tolerant environment. There, a flourishing Jewish community with important Talmudic academies. Is that a misquote? Academies. Oh, goodness gracious. Didn't even occur to me. All right. Thrived in Babylonia. engaging in notable rivalries with the Talmudic academies of Palestine. During the 4th century, the Emperor Constantine made Constantinople the capital of East Roman Empire and made Christianity an accepted religion. His mother, Helena, made a pilgrimage to Jerusalem 326 to 328 AD and led the construction of the Church of the Nativity, basilica located in Bethlehem, West Bank, Palestine. The grotto holds a prominent religious significance to Christians of various denominations and the birthplace of Jesus. The grotto is the oldest site continuously used as a place of worship. I assume that's what that means. The birthplace of Jesus in Bethlehem, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, burial site of Jesus in Jerusalem, and other key churches that still exist. The name Jerusalem was restored to Alea Capitolina and became a Christian city. The Jews were still banned from living in Jerusalem, but were allowed to visit and worship at the site of the ruined temple. Again, I think there's some mosque now built on the Temple Mount. I'm not sure. No, I don't know what it is. Over the course of the next century, Christians worked to eradicate paganism, leading to the destruction of classical Roman traditions and eradication of their temples. Well, tit for tat, isn't it? And other Jewish revolts in the Galilee erupted against the corrupt Roman governor. All right. Byzantine period, 390 to 634. The Roman Empire split in 390 CE, and the region became part of the Eastern Roman Empire known as Byzantine. I might skip to the Ottoman Empire because I think that they were the ones who ruled it with the rise of... Who was the dude? Saladin. I might skim over this a little bit. The Roman Empire, the region became part of the Eastern Roman Empire known as the Byzantine Empire. Under Byzantine rule, much of the region and its non-Jewish population were won over by Christianity, which eventually became the dominant religion in the region. The presence of holy sites drew Christian pilgrims. See, I think there was a thing with this, actually, where there would be the idea that you couldn't have had Christian slaves. You couldn't hold Christian slaves. So there might have been other incentives beyond theological integrity to merit converting to Christianity. The presence of holy sites drew Christian pilgrims. Some chose to settle, contributing to the rise of Christian majority. Christian authorities encouraged this pilgrim movement, appropriate lands construction, magnificent churches at locations linked to biblical narratives. Established modern. Alright, here's one. During the Byzantine period, Jewish presence in the region declined, and it is believed that the Jews lost their majority status in Palestine. In the 4th century, while Judaism remained the sole non-Christian religion, tolerated restrictions on Jews gradually increased, prohibiting the construction of new places of worship, holding public office, or owning Christian slaves. So Jews couldn't own Christian slaves. Okay. In 425, after the death of the last Nazi, Gamaliel the sixth, sorry. Nazi office in the Sanhedrin was officially abolished, and the standing Yeshu... Wait, what is this? Oh, come on. Alright. What is this? Traditional Jewish educational institution focused on the study of rabbinic literature. Alright. And the standing of Yeshivot, I don't know. The leadership, and the standing of the Yeshivot weakened. The leadership void was gradually filled by Jewish centers in Babylonia, which would assume a leading role in the Jewish world for generations after the Byzantine period. During the 5th and 6th century AD, the region witnessed a series of Samaritan revolts against the Byzantine rule. Their suppression resulted in the decline of Samaritan presence and influence, and further consolidated the Christian domination. Though it is acknowledged that some Jews and Samaritans converted to Christianity during the Byzantine period, the reliable historical records are limited. They pertain to individual conversions rather than entire communities. All right, early Muslim period. These guys, Muslims, they were like the OG. Well, I say OG conquistadors. Feels like religiously, at least, they might have been one of the OG. Oh goodness, conquistadors, colonizers. They were right up there with the Romans. Well, technically, they would have. I think the Ottoman Empire would have brought about kind of come in after the Roman Empire was falling. I think the Roman Empire was falling around maybe 400, and then it maybe broke into several sectors. The Holy Roman Empire. I don't know if the Byzantine would have been a sector of that. And these guys, I guess, came in after the Byzantines. They went into a lot of North Africa too, I think. Barbary slave trade. The Berbers. I think they kind of actually... The Berbers would, I think, have actually been natives to North Africa, which the Muslims kind of stomped out a little bit. But I guess the ethnic... whatever kind of remained. I think the Berbers, though, was an actual... It was either some sort of social or religious thing that the Muslims kind of pushed out when they came in. Actually, the Muslims got all the way over into Spain, I think. I think they at one point... I don't know how much of Spain they got into, but they were eventually kicked out of there. You know, crazy stuff. For the record, I kind of put everyone in and around the Mediterranean into almost the same racial grouping. Like North Africa, Middle East, South Europe, they're kind of... There was a lot of, like, trade that went on. And to my mind, they're all kind of into the same almost ethnic grouping a little bit. Mediterranean. We'll call it the Mediterranean race. Alright. Now I have to look up Levant. Where was I? I was looking up this, actually. This was kind of the extent, I think, of the... At a certain point. But I think at one point, like, the Ottoman Empire... Well, I don't know if it was the Ottomans, per se, but the Muslim Empire would have gone all the way up into Spain. Yeah, that's a goodly portion of the world. Area of influence. So the white areas are areas of influence. Then you have vassal states like this. No, never mind. That's a piece of water. This is a vassal state up here. Okay. Stupid. I think that's is that the Black Sea? Yeah. Anyways, back to the main business. Right. All right. The Levant okay. So the Levant, I think, is just the entire area by an Arab army under command of Umar ibn al-Khattab in 635 and became a province of Bilad al-Sham, the Rashidun Caliphate. Two military districts, Jun Filastin, spelled different but I guess pronounced maybe the same, and Hun al-Urdun was established in Palestine. A new city called Ramla was built as a Muslim capital of the Hun Filastin. While Tiberias served as the capital of Hun al-Urdun. The Byzantine ban on Jews living in Jerusalem came to an end. So, kudos to them, I guess. In 661, Muawiyah was crowned caliph in Jerusalem, becoming the first of the Damascus-based Umayyad dynasty. Okay. So they dig into Spain, I guess. Yeah, they would have gone all the way around here, pretty far into Asia too. Wow. All right. Umayyad constructed the Dome of the Rock. That's the one on Temple Mount. The Dome of the Rock. Dome of the Rock is an octagonal Islamic shrine at the center of the Al-Aqsa Mosque. The Al-Aqsa Mosque compound on the Temple Mount in the old city of Jerusalem, which I think they're kind of dicey about who they let in there. I think there was something where AP and Tommy Robinson had tried to get in there, and you had to. Well, no, I don't know if it was Temple Mount or something else, but they had to recite some verses of the Quran or something. The old city of Jerusalem, it is the world's oldest surviving work of Islamic architecture and the earliest archaeological attested religious structure to be built by a Muslim ruler. Nice. Well, I mean, not nice. It's the Temple Mount, but I guess whatever. It's a nice building in any case. Where the two Jewish temples had been located. A second building, the Al-Aqsa Mosque, was erected on Temple Mount in 705. Both buildings were rebuilt in the 10th century following a series of earthquakes. Okay. In 750, Arab discrimination against non-Arab Muslims led to the Abbasid Revolution, and the Umayyads were replaced by the Abbasid caliphs, who built a new city, Baghdad, to be their capital. This period, known as the Islamic Golden Age, the Arab Empire was the largest in the world, and Baghdad the largest and richest city. Both Arabs and minorities prospered across the region, and much scientific progress was made. There were, however, setbacks. During the 8th century, the Caliph Umar II introduced a law requiring Jews and Christians to wear identifying clothing. Nice. The Jews were required to wear yellow stars surrounding their necks and on their hats. The Christians had to wear blue. Clothing regulations arose during repressive periods of Arab rule, were more designed to humiliate them than persecute non-Muslims. To humiliate than okay, that's not exactly mutually exclusive. Humiliating and persecuting are kind of in the same thing. A poll tax was imposed on all non-Muslims. It's called the jizya, I believe. It's a whole thing. For the record, I believe Christians and Jews are actually kind of privileged people under what's the Sharia. Right. They just have to pay jizya. I think pretty much everyone else, atheists, pagans, would have been just. But no, Jews and Christians, they could live, I think, under Muslim rule. And to be fair, like what is stated in the Quran, and maybe what was done sometimes, isn't maybe not what was always done. But I do think that is kind of the standard that was set out by Muhammad to some extent. I don't know if it was actually stated in the Quran or if it's just kind of what they did at the time. I don't know. In 982, Caliph, the Cairo-based Fatimid dynasty conquered the region. Fatimids were followers of Ismailism. What the? It's a branch of Shia Islam. Okay, so it's still Islam, all right. And claimed descent from Fatima, who was one of Muhammad's wives, I believe. Oh, never mind. Daughter. All right. It's commonly known as Fatima al-Zahra, daughter of the Islamic prophet Muhammad, and his wife. What? Was the daughter of the Islam and his wife Khadijah. Okay, sorry. If you ever hear stories about Muhammad, you would maybe understand. He's a kind of a sex fiend. There's a very dubious recollections of him in the Quran and other places. Was Ali the fourth of the Rashidian caliphs? I think there was something about the rightly guided caliphs. All right, and the first Shia Imam. Fatima's sons were Hassan, Hussein. All right. Muhammad's daughter, around the year 1010, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, believed to be Jesus' burial site, was destroyed by Fatima, Caliph al-Hakim. who relented 10 years later and paid for it to be rebuilt. That's nice of him. Not so nice to kill it or destroy it, but nice of him to have it rebuilt. In 1020, Al-Hakim claimed the divine status. Holy shit, that escalated quickly. And the newly formed Druze religion gave him the status of a messiah. How delightful. Okay. Although Arab conquest was relatively peaceful, I don't think relatively peaceful is a way to describe it. In the same way that some protests in recent years have been called relatively peaceful. This was kind of relatively peaceful. There was a lot of killing. Perhaps that they didn't just raze cities to the ground or salt the land with their blood or something like that. But it wasn't exactly peaceful, I don't think. It did alter the country's demographics significantly. Over the ensuing several centuries, the region experienced a drastic decline in its population, from an estimated 1 million during the Roman Empire and Byzantine times to some 300,000 by the early Ottoman Empire. This demographic collapse was accompanied by a slow process of Islamization. See, that's the thing, again, Christians and Jews could live under Islamic rule, but, you had to pay a jizya, like a really high tax or something like that. So there was incentivizations to join Islam. That resulted from the flight of non-Muslim populations, immigrants of Muslims, and local conversion. The majority of the remaining population belonged to the lowest classes, while the Arab conquerors themselves left the area after the conquest and moved on to other places. The settlement of Arab tribes in the area, both before and after the conquest, also contributed to the Islamization. As a result, the Muslim population steadily grew, and the area became gradually dominated by Muslims on a political and social level. During the Islamic period, many Christians and Samaritans belonging to the Byzantine upper class migrated from the coastal cities to northern Syria and Cyprus, which were still under Byzantine control, while others fled to the Central Highlands and the Transjordan. As a result, coastal towns, formerly important economic centers connected with the rest of the Byzantine world, were emptied of most of their residents. Most of these cities, namely Ashkelon, Acre, Arsuf, and Gaza, now fortified border towns, were resettled by Muslim populations who developed them into significant Muslim centers. The region of Samaria also underwent a process of Islamization as a result of waves of conversions among Samaritan population and an influx of Muslims into the area. The predominantly Jacobite monophysite try to say that one. Monophysitism is a Christological doctrine that states that there is only one nature, the divine, and the person of Jesus Christ, who is incarnate Word, is rejected as heretical by the Catholic Church, Eastern Orthodox Church, Anglicanism, Lutheranism. Okay. Christian population had been hostile to Byzantine Orthodoxy, and at times for that reason welcomed Muslim rule. There was no strong evidence or forced conversion. There is no strong evidence for forced conversion or that the jizya tax significantly affected such. I don't know. If you're saying you literally have to have a tax on you if you don't convert, and maybe it's just in this specific case, but I feel like that there were. I don't know. You'd have to look that up, I guess. I'm not the scholar I should be on that regard. The demographic situation in Palestine was further altered by Irma decline under Abbas, and it is thought that in the 749 earthquake hastened the process by causing an increase in the number of Jewish Christians, Samaritans, the Jews, Christians, and Samaritans who emigrated to the diaspora communities, while also leaving behind others who remained in the devastated cities and poor villages until they converted to Islam. Right, because they couldn't afford the jizya. Historical records and archaeological evidence. Many Samaritans converted under Abbasad and Tulunid rule. After suffering through several difficulties, such droughts, earthquakes, religious persecution, heavy taxes, and anarchy, the same region also saw the settlement of Arabs. Over the period, the Samaritan population drastically decreased, and with the rural Samaritan population converting to Islam and small urban communities remaining in Nablus and Caesarea, as well as in Cairo, Damascus, Aleppo, Sarepta. Nevertheless, the Muslim population remained a minority in a predominantly Christian area, and it is likely that their status persisted until the Crusader period. Crusades and Mongols. In 1995, Pope Urban II called upon... urban, city, urbane. What does urbane mean? Urbane. I have to look that up. All right. Urbane. Courteous and refined in manner. Okay. So I'm assuming it's maybe in reference to like city manners or something? I don't know. Alright, Pope Urban called on Christians to wage a holy war and to recapture Jerusalem from Muslim rule. Responding to this call, Christians launched the First Crusade. The same year, a military campaign aimed at retaking the Holy Land. In the same year, a military campaign aimed at retaking the Holy Land, ultimately resulting in the successful siege and conquest of Jerusalem in 1999. In the same year, the Crusades conquered Bet Shean and Tiberias, and in the following decades, they captured the coastal cities with the support of the Italian city-state fleets, establishing these coastal ports as crucial strongholds for Crusader rule in the region. Following the First Crusade, several Crusader states were established in the Levant, with the Kingdom of Jerusalem, Regnum Hierosolimanum, for the love, stupid Latin, Hierosolimanum, alright, assuming a preeminent position and enjoying a special status among them. The population consisted of predominantly of Muslims, Christians, Jews, and Samaritans, while the Crusaders remained a minority and relied on the local population who worked the soil. The region saw a construction of numerous robust castles and fortresses, yet efforts to establish permanent European villages proved unsuccessful. Around 1180, Ronald de Chatillon, French, they always cause problems, if I remember correctly. I'm assuming he's the one who caused the problems. Ruler of Transjordan, caused an increasing conflict with the Ayyubid Sultan Saladin. Alright, who was a baller? I guess I don't know. I think by all accounts he was kind of a cool guy. A noble fellow, in any case. Leading to the defeat of the Crusaders in 1187, Battle of Hattin, above Tiberias. Saladin was able to peacefully take Jerusalem and conquered most of the former Kingdom of Jerusalem. Saladin's court physician was Maimonides, which I'm pretty sure is a Jewish name. A refuge from Almohad, Muslim, a refuge from Almohad, Muslim persecution in Cordoba, Spain, where all non-Muslim religions had been banned. So, again, I'm pretty sure Maimonides is Jewish, is a Hebrew name, but he's a refuge from Muslim persecution in Cordoba, Spain. Oh, no, where all non-Muslim religions had been banned. So he was a refuge from Muslim persecution in Spain. Right, okay, it makes more sense. Anyways. The Christian world's response to the loss of Jerusalem came in the Third Crusade of 1190. After lengthy battles and negotiations, Richard the Lionheart and Saladin concluded the Treaty of Jaffa in 1992, whereby Christians were granted free passage to make pilgrimage to the holy sites, while Jerusalem remained under Muslim rule. In 1229, Jerusalem peacefully reverted into Christian control as a part of a treaty between Holy Roman Emperor Frederick II and Ayyubid Sultan al-Kamil that ended the Sixth Crusade. In 1244, Jerusalem was sacked by the Khwarizm Tartars, a group of Turkic-speaking people found across Eastern Europe. All right. The Ashnu dynasty, or the was a Sunni Muslim dynasty of Turkic Mamelukes. Okay, originating from the Bekdili clan of the Oghuz Turks. You know, the Turks actually believe they descended from wolves somehow. They're kind of a stuck-up people. They are literally the Germans of Asia. Now, technically, that would maybe be the Japanese. They have some really interesting... I think they would believe in some sort of polygenetic thing where they originated from different monkeys than everyone else or something. Weird. Weird. All right. Weird. Sorry. All right. All right. Who decimated the city's Christian oh, crap. Jerusalem was sacked by the Tartars, who decimated the... For the record, decimated just means reduced by 10th, but I think in this case it means destroyed. Decimated the city's Christian population, drove out the Jews, and razed the city. The Khwarezmians were driven out by the Ayyubids, in 1247. Between 1258 and 1291, the area was a frontier between the Mongol invaders, occasional Crusader allies, and Mamelukes of Egypt. The Mamluk Sultanate, also known as the Mamluk Egypt or Mamluk Empire, was a state ruled by Egypt. Was a state that ruled Egypt, the Levant, and Hejaz from mid-13th century to early 16th century, with Cairo as its capital. It was ruled by a military caste of Mamelukes, headed by a sultan. Right. So the Mamelukes were the soldiers, yeah. So I'm guessing this is the Levant. Maybe this part? I'm not for sure. Oh, let's look that up. All right. Levant. All right. So it's this whole area here? The notion of Levant has undergone a dynamic process of historical evolution in usage and meaning. Levantine originally referred to European residents what am I looking at here? Let's go to images. So this is the Levant, like the whole, I think it's got the whole area there. But maybe it involves Turkey. I think it would mostly be relegated to just this specific area here. All right. So now we know what the Levant is. All right. Alright. Wrong one. Alright. Took control of the kingdom following the failed invasion. Mamelukes of Egypt. The conflict impoverished the country and severely reduced population. In Egypt, a caste of warrior slaves known as Mamelukes, warrior slaves, fancy that, gradually took control of the kingdom. The Mamelukes were mostly Turkish. So they came from Turkey, but were soldiers in Egypt. I guess that's the thing. Mostly of Turkish origin and brought as children and then trained in warfare. They were highly prized warriors who gave rulers independence of native aristocracy. In Egypt, they took control of the kingdom following a failed invasion by the Crusaders, Seventh Crusade. French. You can never trust a Frenchman. The first Mamluk Sultan, Qutuz, of Egypt, defeated the Mongols in the Battle of Ain Jalut, Goliath Spring, near Ain Harod, ending the Mongol advances. He was assassinated by one of his generals, Baibars, who went on to eliminate most of the Crusader outposts. The Mamelukes ruled Palestine until 1516, regarding it as part of Syria and Hebron. Jews were banned from worshipping at the Cave of the Patriarchs, the second holiest site in Judaism, and they were only allowed to enter 7 steps inside the site. And the ban remained in place until Israel assumed control of the West Bank in the Six-Day War. The Egyptian Mamluk Sultan, Al-Asharif Khalil, conquered the last outpost of Crusader rule in 1291. The Mamelukes continued the policy of Ayyubids. I don't know. Now I have to look up how to say this. How's it said? They have an actual pronunciation? I'm just double checking and get my headphones connected back up here if I can. Alright.
अब बात आती है कि इसके बाद किसने रूल किया, इसके बाद इनके अंडर कुछ उसको भी वापस इसकी शुरुआत हुई थी, तो इसके बारे में पढ़ते हैं. अब बात आती है कि इसके बाद किसने इसकी शुरुआत.
Alright, let's just look up pronunciation. Pronunciation. Ayyubids. AI. Oh my goodness. Ayyubid. Ayyubid. Alright. That's easier. Ayyubid made the strategic decision to destroy the coastal area and to bring desolation to many of its cities, from Tyre in the north to Gaza in the south. Gaza. Oh, why do people say it that way? Is that the appropriate way? Gaza. I've heard it pronounced that way. Ports were destroyed and various materials were dumped to make them inoperable. The goal was to prevent attacks from the sea and to given the fear of the return of Crusaders. The goal was to prevent attacks from the sea, given the fear of the return of the Crusaders. Crusaders were the Vikings of the Middle East. For the record, actually, Vikings might have been the Vikings of the Middle East. They got pretty far. I think they even went down some into Africa sometimes. The goal was to prevent attacks from the sea, given the fear. This had a long-term effect in those areas, which remained sparsely populated for centuries. The activity in that time concentrated more inland. With the 1492 expulsion of the Jews from Spain and the 1997 persecution of the Jews and Muslims by Manuel I of Portugal, many Jews moved eastward, with some deciding to settle in the Mamluk Palestine. As a consequence, the local Jewish community underwent significant rejuvenation. The influx of Sephardic Jews began under Mamluk rule in the 15th century and continued through the 16th century, especially after the Ottoman conquest. As city dwellers, the majority of Sephardic Jews preferred to settle in urban areas, mainly in Safed, but also in Jerusalem, while the Mustayarbi community, what is this? The Aramaic-speaking Jews, largely Mizrahi Jews and Maghrebi Jews. That sounds weird. Maghrebi Jews lived in the Middle East and North Africa prior to the arrival and integration of the Ladino-speaking Sephardic Jews and of the Iberian Peninsula, following their expulsion from Spain. All right. Comprised the majority of the village Jews. Ottoman period. Yeah. Under the Mamelukes, the area was province of Bilad al-Sham, Syria. It was conquered by Turkish Sultan 1516 to 17. 1516 to 1517, becoming part of the province of Ottoman Syria for the next 4 centuries. First as the Damascus Eyalet, and later as the Syria Violette. Oh, okay, I don't know what this. Following the Tanzimat reorganization of 1864. With more favorable conditions that followed the Ottoman conquest, the immigration of Jews fleeing Catholic Europe, which had already begun under Mamluk rule, continued as soon as an influx of exiled Sephardic Jews came to dominate the Jewish community in the area. In 1558, Selim, the successor to Suleiman, whose wife Norbanu Sultan was Jewish, he gave control over Tiberias to Dona Gracia Mendez Nasi, one of the richest women in Europe and an escapee from the Inquisition. She encouraged Jewish refugees to settle in the area and established the Hebrew printing press. Safed became a center for study of the Kabbalah and other Jewish religious studies. What is this? Is an esoteric method, discipline, and school of thought in Jewish mysticism. It forms the foundation of mystical religious interpretations within Judaism. A traditional Kabbalist is called a Mekubal. All right. Culminating with Joseph Cairo's writing the Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law, consulted in various legal codes in Rabbinic Judaism. It was authored in the city of Safed, in what is now Israel, by Joseph Cairo, published in Venice 2 years later. Published in 1565 in Venice, it became the near universal standard of Jewish religious law. Danya Nasi's nephew, Joseph Nasi, was made governor of Tiberias, and he encouraged Jewish settlements from Italy. In 1660, Druze power. So Druze are kind of, I don't know if they're actually like Muslim. They've kind of got their own thing going on, I think, but there would be an Arabic like ethnic group. Led to the destruction of Safed and Tiberias in the late 18th century. A local Arab sheikh, Sahir al-Umar, created a de facto independent emirate in the Galilee. Ottoman attempts to subdue the sheikh failed, but after Sahir's death, the Ottomans restored the rule in the area. In 1799, Napoleon briefly occupied the country and planned a proclamation inviting Jews to create a state. The proclamation was shelved following the defeat at Acre. Oh, all right. In 1831, I was about to say a Frenchman not finishing something. I'm sure. Okay, I gotta take it easy on the French a little bit. In 1831, Muhammad Ali of Egypt, an Ottoman ruler who left the empire and tried to modernize Egypt, conquered Ottoman Syria and imposed, conscriptions leading to the Arab Revolt. In 1838, there was another Druze revolt. In 1839, the Moses Montefiore met with Mohammed Pasha in Egypt and signed an agreement to establish 100 to 200 Jewish villages in the Damascus islet of the Ottoman Syria. But in 1840, the Egyptians withdrew before the deal was implemented. Oh, the Egyptians are just like the French, returning the area to the Ottoman government. In 1844, the Jews constituted the largest population group in Jerusalem. By 1896, the Jews constituted an absolute majority in Jerusalem, but the overall population in Palestine was 88% Muslim and 9% Christian. The birth of Zionism. Between 1882 and 1903, approximately 35,000 Jews moved to Palestine, known as the First Aliyah. In the Russian Empire, Jews faced growing persecution and legal restrictions. Half the world's Jews lived in the Russian Empire, where they were restricted to living in the Pale of Settlement. What is this? Western region of the Russian Empire with varying borders that existed from 1791 to 1917, which is a permanent residency, in which permanent residency by the Jews was allowed, and beyond which the Jews' residency, permanent or temporary, was mostly forbidden. Okay. Severe pogroms in the early 1800s and legal repression led to 2 million Jews emigrating from the Russian Empire. 1.5 million went to the United States. Popular destinations were also Germany, France, and the United Kingdom, the Netherlands, Argentina, and Palestine. The Zionist movement began in earnest in 1882 with Leon Pinsker's pamphlet Auto-Emancipation, which argued for the creation of a Jewish national homeland as a means to avoid the violence plaguing Jewish communities in Eastern Europe. At the 1884 Katowice Conference, Russian Jews established the Bilu and Hovel Zion, Lovers of Zion movement, with the aim of settling Palestine. In 1878, Russian Jewish immigrants established the village of Petah Tikva, the beginning of hope, followed by Rishon LeZion, first to Zion, in 1882. The existing Ashkenazi communities were concentrated in the 4 holy cities, extremely poor, and relied upon donations, halukah, from groups abroad, while the new settlements were small farming communities, but still relied upon funding by French Baron Edmond James de Rothschild, who sought to establish profitable enterprises. Many early migrants could not find work and left, but despite the problems, more settlements arose and communities grew. After the Ottoman conquest of Yemen in 1881, a large number of Yemenite Jews also immigrated to Palestine, often driven by Messianism? All right. In 1897, Theodor Herzl published Der Judenstaat. All of these things sound racist because they're in German. All right. In which he asserts that the solution to the growing anti-Semitism in Europe, the so-called Jewish question, was to establish a Jewish state. In 1897, the West Zionist Organization was founded and the first Zionist Congress proclaimed itself to establish a home for the Jewish people in Palestine, secured under public law. The Congress chose Hatikva, the hope, as its anthem. Between 1904 and 1940, around 40,000 Jews settled in the area known as Israel, Second Aliyah. In 1908, the World Zionist Organization set up. Why are we going like okay between 1904 and 1904? Okay, that makes sense, I guess. The World Zionist Organization set up a Palestinian bureau, also known as the Eretz Israel Office, in Jaffa, and began to adopt systematic oppression, systematic Jewish settlement policy. In 1909, residents of Jaffa bought land outside the city walls and built the first entirely Hebrew-speaking town, Ahuzat Bayit, later named Tel Aviv. Okay. In 1915 to 1916, Talat Pasha of the Young Turks. Okay, different Young Turks, I think. Different Young Turks. The Young Turks were a broad opposition movement in the late Ottoman Empire to the absolute regime of Sultan Abdul Hamid. The most powerful organization within the movement was, and most conflated, was the Committee of Union and Progress. Interesting. Forced around 1 million Armenian Christians from their homes in eastern Turkey, marching them south through Syria in what is now known as the Armenian Genocide. The number of dead is thought to be around 700,000. Hundreds of thousands were forcibly converted to Islam. A community of survival settled in Jerusalem, one of whom developed the now iconic Armenian pottery. Interesting. World War I. During World War I, most Jews supported the German laws because they were fighting the Russians, who were Jews supported the Germans because they were fighting the Russians, who were regarded as the Jews' main enemy. In Britain, the government sought Jewish support for the war effort for a variety of reasons, including an anti-Semitic perception of Jewish power in the Ottoman Empire, in the Ottoman Empire's Young Turks movement, which was based in Thessalonica, the most Jewish city in Europe. Okay, hold on. I'm going to go over this again. In Britain, the government sought Jewish support for the war effort for a variety of reasons, including the anti-Semitic perception of Jewish power in the Ottoman Empire's Young Turks movement, which was based in Thessalonica. I'm going to guess Britain would have been heavily involved in colonizing at this point, so they might have been involved in the Middle East, they might have had interest in that area, which was based in Thessaloniki, the most Jewish city in Europe. 40% of the 160,000 population were Jewish. The British hoped to secure American Jewish support for U.S. intervention on Britain's behalf. There was already sympathy for the aims of Zionism in British government, including the Prime Minister Lloyd George. Over 14,000 Jews were expelled by the Ottoman military commander from the Jaffa area in 1914 to 1915 due to suspicions that they were subjects of Russia, an enemy, or Zionists wishing to detach Palestine from the Ottoman Empire. An enemy, that they were subject of Russia, an enemy, or Zionists wishing to detach Palestine from the Ottoman Empire. So this was all still under the Ottoman Empire that this was all happening. And when the entire population, including Muslims, of both Jaffa and Tel Aviv, was subject to an expulsion order on April 1917, the affected Jews could not return until British conquest ended in 1918, which drove the Turks out of southern Syria. A year prior, in 1917, the British Foreign Minister Arthur Balfour sent a public letter to British Lord Rothschild, a leading member of his party and leader of the Jewish community. The letter subsequently became known as the Balfour Declaration. The Balfour Declaration was a public statement issued by the British government in 1917 during the First World War, announcing its support for the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine, then an Ottoman region with a small minority of Jewish populations. All right. A national home for the Jewish people. The declaration provided the British government with a pretext for claiming and governing the country. Okay. New Middle Eastern boundaries were decided by an agreement between British and French bureaucrats. A Jewish legion comprised largely of Zionist volunteers organized by Zev Jabotinsky and George Trumpeldor. Joseph Trumpeldor. It sounds a little bit comical. Anyways, participated in the British invasion. It is also participated in the failed Gallipoli campaign. The Neely Zionist spy network provided the British with details of Ottoman plans and troop concentrations. The Ottoman Empire chose to ally itself with Germany when the First War began. I'm assuming this is the First World War began. Arab leaders dreamed of the freeing themselves from Ottoman rule and establishing self-government or forming an independent Arab state. Therefore, British contacted Hussein bin Ali of the Kingdom of Hejaz, Western Asia, a portion of the Arabian Peninsula, and proposed cooperation. Together, they organized the Arab Revolt that Britain supplied with a very large quantity of rifles and ammunition. In cooperation between British artillery and Arab infantry, the city of Aqaba on the Red Sea was conquered. The Arab army then continued north while Britain attacked the Ottomans from the sea. In 1917 to 1918, Jerusalem and Damascus were conquered from the Ottomans. Britain then broke off cooperation with the Arab army. It turned out that the Britain had already entered into a secret Sykes/Picot agreement. Oh, what the Harry? A secret treaty between the United Kingdom and France, with assent from Russia and Italy to define their mutually agreed spheres of influence and control in an eventual partition of it. Okay, so they're basically partitioning up the Ottoman Empire. Interesting. That meant that only Britain and France would be allowed to administer the land conquered by the Ottoman Empire. It's kind of a double-dealing crap. After pushing out the Ottomans, Palestine came under martial law. Britain, French, and Arab occupied enemy territory governed the area shortly before the armistice with the Ottomans until the propagation of the Mandate in 1920. First years, the British Mandate of Palestine included Balfour Declaration, was confirmed by the League of Nations. In 1922, it came into effect in 1923. The territory of Transjordan was also covered by the Mandate, but also under separate rules that excluded it from the Balfour Declaration. Britain signed the treaty with the United States, which did not join the League of Nations, in which the United States endorsed the terms of the Mandate, which was approved unanimously by both the U.S. Senate and House of Representatives. The Balfour Declaration was published on the 2nd of November 1917, and the Bolsheviks seized control of Russia a week later. This led to civil war in the Russian Empire. Between 1918 and 1921, a series of pogroms led to the death of at least 100,000 Jews, mainly in what is now Ukraine. The displacement as refugees of a further 600,000. This led to further migration to Palestine between 1919 and 1923. Some 40,000 Jews arrived in Palestine in what is known as the Third Aliyah. I don't know how to say that. Aliyah. Many of the Jewish immigrations of this period were socialist Zionists. How delightful! And supported the Bolsheviks. Were these the people who were oppressing them? The migrants became known as pioneers, halutzim, experienced or trained in agriculture who established self-sustaining communes called kibbutzim? Kibbutzim? I've heard the word kibbutz. Kibbutzim. All right. Malarial marshes in the Jezreel Valley and heifer plains were drained and converted into agricultural use. That sounds like a job and a half. The land was bought by Jewish National Fund, a Zionist charity that collected money abroad for that purpose. After the French victory over the Arab kingdom of Syria ended hopes of Arab independence, there were clashes between Arabs and Jews in Jerusalem during the 1920 Nebi Musa riots and Jaffa the following year, leading to the establishment of Haganah, underground Jewish militia. A Jewish agency was created which issued the entry permits by the British and distributed funds donated by Jews abroad. Between 1924 and 1929, over 80,000 Jews arrived in the Fourth Aliyah, fleeing anti-Semitism and heavy tax burdens imposed on trade in Poland and Hungary. Inspired by Zionism and motivated by the closure of the United States borders by Immigration Act of 1924, which severely limited immigration from Eastern and Southern Europe. Pinyas Rutenberg, a former commissioner of St. Petersburg in Russia's pre-Bolshevik government, built the first electric generators in Palestine. In 1925, the Jewish Agency established the Hebrew University in Jerusalem and the Technological University in Haifa. British authorities introduced the Palestine pound, worth 100 mils, in 1927, replacing the Egyptian pound as the unit of currency in the Mandate. From 1928, the democratically elected Vaid Lumu Jewish National Council, or JNC, became the main administration institution of the Palestinian Jewish community, Yeshuv, and included non-Zionist Jews. As the Yeshuv grew, the JNC adopted more government-type function, such as education, healthcare, and security. With British permission, the Vaad Lumi raised its own taxes and ran independent services for the Jewish population. In 1929, tensions grew over Kotel, Wailing Wall, the holiest spot in the world for modern Judaism. The Wailing Wall is an ancient retaining wall of the built-up hill known to the Jews and Christians as Temple Mount. So I assume for quite a while the Jews weren't allowed on the Temple Mount. So the Wailing Wall became like the closest thing to it, I guess, maybe, sort of. So obviously the Dome of the Rock is still up there. And the other mosque, or I guess, I don't know, the Dome of the Rock and the other mosque the same thing, or is it different buildings or different compounds or something? Anyways, its most famous section, known as the same name, often shortened by the Jews as the Kotel or Kosel, known as the West or the Wailing Wall. Alright, the holy spot, which was the narrow alleyway where the British banned Jews from using chairs or curtain. What the Harry? Many of the worshippers were elderly and needed seats. They also wanted to separate women from men. The Mufti of Jerusalem said it was Muslim property and deliberately had cattle driven through the alleyway. He alleged that the Jews were seeking control of the Temple Mount. Okay, so, yeah, Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock. Those are the ones up there. Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock. This provided a spark for August 1929 Palestinian riots. The main victims were the non-Zionist ancient Jewish community at Hebron, who were massacred. The riots led to right-wing Zionists establishing their own militia in 1931, the Ergen Tzvai Luemi, national military organization known as the Hebrew by its acronym Etzel. which was committed to a more aggressive policy towards the Arab population. During the interwar period, the perception grew that there was an irreconcilable tension between the two mandatory functions. Factions? Is it supposed to be functions? Of providing for a Jewish homeland in Palestine and the goal of preparing the country for self-determination. The British rejected the principle of majority rule or any other measure that would give the Arab population, who formed the majority of the population, control over Palestinian territory. Between 1929 and 1938, 250,000 Jews arrived in Palestine, fifth Aliyah. In 1932, the Jewish Agency and the Nazis negotiated the Havara transfer agreement, under which 50,000 German Jews would be transferred to Palestine. The Jews' positions were confiscated and returned to Nazis, allowed the Havara organization to purchase 14 million pounds worth of German goods for the export to Palestine and use it to compensate the immigrants. Although many Jews wanted to leave Nazi Germany, the Nazis prevented Jews from taking any money and restricted them to 2 suitcases so few could pay British entry tax. The agreement was controversial, and labor Zionist leaders who negotiated the agreement, Haim Arab something, was assassinated in Tel Aviv in 1933. The assassination was used by British to create a tension between Zionist left and the Zionist right. Arlo Sorov had been a boyfriend of Magda Richel some years before she married Joseph Goebbels. Okay. It's an interesting bit of intelligence history. There had been speculation that he was assassinated by the Nazis, who hid the connection, but there is no evidence for it. Between 1933 and 1936, 174,000 arrived despite large sums of British demands for immigration. The Jews had to prove they had 1,000 pounds for families with capital equivalents to 85,000 in 2023. Holy crap. You have to have, for the love, 500 pounds if they had professionals and 250 pounds if they were skilled laborers. Okay. Jewish immigration and Nazi propaganda contributed to the large-scale 1936 and 1939 Arab revolt in Palestine. A large Jewish immigration and Nazi propaganda, a large nationalist uprising directed at ending British rule. The head of the Jewish Agency, Ben Gurion, responded to the Arab revolt with a policy of havlaga, self-restraint, and refusal to be provoked by Arab attacks in order to prevent polarization. The Etzel group broke off the Haganah in opposition to this policy. British responses to the revolt with the Peel Commission, 1936 to 19... Public inquiry recommended that an exclusively Jewish territory be created in the Galilee and western coast, including the population transfer of 225,000 Arabs, the rest becoming an exclusively Arab area. The two main Jewish leaders, Chaim Weizmann and David Ben Gurion, had convinced the Zionist Congress to approve equivocally the Peel recommendations as the basis for more negotiations. The plan was rejected outright by the Palestinian Arab leadership, and they renewed the revolt, which caused the British to abandon the plan as unworkable. Testifying before the Peel Commission, Weizmann said, "There are in Europe 6 million people for whom the world is divided into places where they cannot live and places where they cannot enter." In 1938, the U.S. called an international conference to address the question of the vast number of Jews trying to escape Europe. Britain made its attendance contingent upon Palestine being kept out of the discussion. No Jewish representatives were invited. Okay. The Nazis proposed their own solution. The Jews of Europe be shipped to Madagascar. Oh, for the love. Okay, that's the Madagascar plan. That's something. The agreement proved fruitless, and Jews were stuck in Europe. With millions of Jews trying to leave Europe and every country closed to Jewish migration, British decided to close Palestine. Of course, as one does. The White Paper of 1939 recommended that independent Palestine, governed jointly by Arab and Jews, be established within 10 years. The White Paper agreed to allow 75,000 Jewish immigrants into Palestine over the period of 1940 to 44, after which migration would require Arab approval. Both Arab and Jewish leaders rejected the White Paper. In March of 1940, the British High Commissioner of Palestine issued an edict banning Jews from purchasing land in 95% of Palestine. Okay. Jews now resorted to illegal immigration. I bet it was not something often organized by the Mossad and the for the love, these are some weird names. All right, with no outside help and no countries ready to admit them. Very few Jews managed to escape Europe between 1939 and 1945. Those caught by the British were mostly imprisoned in Maturis. There's an island off of Africa. Interesting. During the Second World War, the Jewish Agency worked to establish a Jewish army that would fight alongside British forces. Churchill supported the plan, but British military and government opposition led to its rejection. The British demanded a number of Jewish recruits match the number of Arab recruits. In June 1940, Italy declared war on British Commonwealth and sided with Germany. Within months, Italian planes bombed Tel Aviv and Haifa, inflicting multiple casualties. In May 1941, Palmyra was established to defend Yishuv against the planned Axis invasion through North Africa. British refusal to provide arms to the Jews, even when Rommel's forces were advancing through Egypt in June 1942, intended on occupying Palestine, and the 1939 White Paper led to the emergence of Zionist leadership in Palestine that believed conflict with Britain was inevitable. Despite this, the Jewish Agency called on Palestine Jewish youth to volunteer for the British Army. 30,000 Palestinian Jews and 12,000 Palestinian Arabs enlisted in the British Army forces during the war. In June 1944, the British agreed to create a Jewish brigade. The British agreed to create a Jewish brigade that would fight in Italy. Approximately 1.5 million Jews around the world served in every branch of the Allied armies, mainly in Soviet and U.S. armies. Okay, so they were in the Soviets as well. All right. 200,000 Jews died serving in the Soviet army alone. A small number, about 200 activists dedicated to resisting British administration in Palestine, broke away from Etzel, which advocated support for Britain during the war, and formed Lehi. It's led by... In 1942, the USR released the revisionist Zionist leader, Begin from Gulag. He went to Palestine, taking command of the Etzel organization with a policy of increased conflict against British. At about the same time, Yitzhak Shamir escaped from the camp in Etria, where the British were holding Lehi activists without trial, taking command of the Lehi Stongang. The Jews in Middle East were also affected by the war. Most of North Africa came under Nazi control, and many Jews were used as slaves. In 1941, pro-Axis coup in Iraq was accompanied by massacres of Jews. Okay, Jewish Agency put together plans for the last stand in the event of Rommel invading Palestine. The Nazis planned to exterminate Palestine's Jews. Between 1939 and 45, the Nazis, aided by local forces, led systematic efforts to kill every person of Jewish extraction in Europe. The Holocaust caused the deaths of approximately 6 million Jews. A quarter of those were killed were children. The Polish and German Jewish communities, which played an important role in defining the pre-1945 Jewish world, mostly ceased to exist. In the United States and Palestine, Jews of European origin became disconnected from their families and roots. As the Holocaust mainly affected Ashkenazi Jews, Sephardic and Mizrahi Jews, who'd been a minority, became a much more significant factor in the Jewish world. Those Jews who survived in Central Europe were displaced persons, refugees, and Anglo-American Committee of Inquiry established an examination of the Palestine issue, surveyed their ambitions, and found that over 95 wanted to migrate to Palestine. 95% wanted to migrate to Palestine. In the Zionist movement, the moderate pro-British and British citizen, Weizmann, whose son died flying in the RAF, was undermined by British anti-Zionist policies. Leadership of the movement passed to the Jewish Agency of Palestine, now led by the anti-British Socialist Zionist Party, MAPAI, led by David Ben-Gurion. Let me see what time it is. Okay, I gotta get this done here. I'm probably gonna finish with the Second World War here and leave it at that. The illegal migration became the main form of Jewish entry into Palestine across Europe. Brika, flight, an organization of former partisans and ghetto fighters. What are partisans? Were fighters in irregular military groups participating in the Jewish resistance movement against Nazi Germany and in its collaborators during World War II. Smuggled Holocaust survivors from Eastern Europe to the Mediterranean ports. There were small boats tried to breach the British blockades of Palestine. Meanwhile, Jews from Arab countries began moving into Palestine over land, despite British efforts to curb immigration. During the 14 years of the Ali Bet, over 100,000 Jews entered Palestine. By the end of World War II, the Jewish population of Palestine had increased to 33% of the total population. In an effort to win independence, Zionists now waged guerrilla war against the British. The main underground Jewish militia, the Haganah, formed the alliance called the Jewish Resistance Movement. Okay, where does this end? All right, let's read down to there. With Etzel and Sterngang to fight British. In June 1946, following an instance of Jewish sabotage, such as the Night of Bridges, the British launched Operation Agatha, arresting 2,700 Jews, including the leadership of the Jewish agencies whose headquarters were raided. Those arrested were held without trial. On the 4th of July, 1946, a massive pogrom in Poland led to a wave of Holocaust survivors fleeing to Europe for Palestine. 3 weeks later, Ergun bombed the British military headquarters. Man, those guys can catch a break. Ergun bombed the British military headquarters of King David Hotel in Jerusalem, killing 91 people. In the days following the bombing, Tel Aviv was placed under curfew, and over 120,000 Jews, nearly 20% of the Jewish population of Palestine, were questioned by the police. In the U.S., Congress criticized the British handling of the situation and considered delaying loans that were vital to British post-war recovery. The alliance between Haganah and Etzel was dissolved after the King David bombing. Between 1945 and 1948, 100,000 to 120,000 Jews left Poland. Their departure was largely organized by Zionist activists under the umbrella of the semi-clandestine organization Beria Flight. Beria is also responsible for the organized emigration of Jews from Romania, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, and Yugoslavia, totaling 250,000, including Poland, Holocaust survivors. The British imprisoned the Jews trying to enter Palestine, and the Al-Atlit detainee camp and Cyprus internment camps. Those were mainly Holocaust survivors, including large numbers of children and orphans, in response to Cypriot attack. Fears that Jews would never leave, and because the 75,000 quota established by the 1939 White Paper had never been filled. The British allowed the refugees to enter Palestine at a rate of 750 per month. All right. United States partition plan. I guess that was the whole thing. Okay, I think that's about all we're going to do. All right, so there is a not very brief history of Israel as to the, wars / treaty / wars / treaty / wars that followed, all the partitioning and Gaza Strip. I guess you're going to have to read that for yourself. Have fun with that.